Thanks for joining us at Before You Go. Today's segment is entitled The Shrinking Giant, Self-Esteem Gone Wrong. It features none other than Chicago's very own Kanye West, nowadays known as just Ye. Ye is a great example of someone who may have too much self esteem, which of course leads to arrogance. That arrogance and inability to self check and self monitor has created headlines and a bit of controversy. Yes, more controversy than normal for Ye. You have folks saying that Kanye is the next OJ. You have people saying that he may not live much longer. Others are saying he's crazy like a fox. And some, of course, say and have said for a long time that he is simply a genius, musically and otherwise. And so we're going to go ahead and unpack and delve deep into that today. But no matter what you think and no matter what you anticipate, we know one thing for certain. These things typically do not end well. Now, before I get started, I'm going to go ahead and ask for you to like, comment, and subscribe, and also turn on your notifications so you can know when new content is posted. Also, I'm going to go ahead and show the copyright disclaimer. We will be using some of the social media clips and photos and things like that for reporting, scholarship, research, criticism, comment, so on and so forth. So we are using fair use. I ran across this quote and it kind of reminded me of the situation with Kanye. It says, "One who is wise is cautious and turns away from evil, but a fool is reckless and careless." And so, again, no matter what you think about Kanye, all of that may apply to him in that quote. I want to go through a little timeline here for those who may, have kept up with him and those who may not. This all started back in 2009. I think it was the MTV Music Awards when he hopped on stage. Beyonce did not win. He thought she should have won. And so he hopped on stage during Taylor Swift's acceptance speech and kind of interrupted her and was very rude, and many years later, he said, what you see here in this quote, "If God didn't want me to run on stage and say Beyonce had the best video, he wouldn't have sat me in the front row." So again, you have this sort of thinking and justification for poor behavior. And again, that was something that happened all the way back in 2009. So his antics have been on display for a very long time. It wasn't until 2016, however, that it was revealed that he was bipolar. And unfortunately, he did not reveal that himself. His then wife, Kim Kardashian, kind of revealed it in an Instagram post. As you can see here, you can pause the video if you want to read it, but a very, very long social media post stating that he was indeed bipolar, what that meant for her and her family, the experiences that she may have had, and how she empathized with others who were going through the same thing. But the funny thing about it is, she came out with this because he had, during, one of his rants, said something that really upset her. So apparently she thought that she would let everybody know, hey, he is in a manic state and he has technically been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And fast forward to, or back, I'm sorry, that was in 2016. There was also the 2013 incident with Sway Calloway. Sway Calloway is a talk show host. I believe he's on satellite radio, but was on MTV back in the day, a very well-known person in terms of culture and music, especially rap music. But he was on Sway's show, and this saying "houseway" came about after this rant. He was talking about all of these fashion icons and industry heads that would not support and back him. And Sway simply asks, like, why don't you empower yourself? You have enough skill and talent. You're dope enough, basically, to do this yourself. And he just started yelling and screaming at poor Sway, and he said, "How, Sway? How, Sway?" Like basically saying, how do you know? He even said, "You don't have the answers," And during this rant, he started to say that he's Andy Warhol, he's Shakespeare, he's all of these different people. He's the most impactful entertainer of the time. He just really is not modest at all. And shout out to Sway for being able to control himself when dealing with this person who clearly was not together emotionally. So that was a very, very public display of a sort of manic state. Fast forward to 2018, where he talked about slavery being a choice, and I found this picture. This picture has been, posted and duplicated so many times, I'm not sure who the owner of it is, but it features a slave whose back looks like really pretty much like a tree, right? He's been scarred from all the beatings. But him saying slavery was a choice is so unfortunate. And one of the things to know about this person is that this person eventually was a free person. He became a free man and he went on to fight in the war. So having context and history to what you say is very important, and especially if you consider yourself a role model or not, you are somebody that people listen to. And so you have to present facts that are accurate and at least fair. um, Go on down the timeline to 2020, and he decided he was going to run for president of the United States of America. I'm not sure what the qualifications were, but he indeed ran for president of the United States, garnering 60,000 votes. So some 60,000 people wasted their vote on Kanye West. And since then, he's even suggested that he will run again in 2024. Now, I want to really come into this conversation now with some things that have happened over the past couple of weeks. And this is where we see the intensity and this timeline really growing from antics and buffoonery, if you will, to now things that are really harmful, things that are threats, using racial expletives. These things harm people, and especially where we are racially and culturally in this country, we can't afford this type of talk from him or anybody else. And so the first instance was with Trevor Noah, who is a comedian, and Trevor has a really different perspective on American life because he is an African American, meaning that he actually lived in Africa, was born there, I believe. And he definitely lived through apartheid, which is I won't go into it, but a severely oppressive society and system that enslaved Africans up until recently, very, very recently in our history. And so he lived through apartheid. He saw that. And he also saw his mom, who was African, a black woman, and his dad, who was European, I believe Dutch or something like that. So he was of mixed heritage in apartheid, and seeing not the European, but another husband the mom had really be abusive to her, and up until the point where he shot her. And he talked about in one of his commentaries that this situation with Kim and Kanye is very reminiscent of some of the things he saw as a child with his mom and her abusive spouse. And it was such a heartfelt commentary, and him saying, basically, if this woman in America is this important, and if she can't stop this guy from harassing her, who can? And I thought it was a very valid point. And whether you like Trevor Noah or not, whether you agree with his politics or his personal life, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about somebody who made a really good point, and as I'm doing right now, it was trying to be reflective on how this person got to where he is, and if we can all learn something from it, and if we can possibly not make mistakes from the past, right? That's growth. That's humanity. But of course, Kanye really, really disliked that. His rebuttal to the commentary was to get on social media and call this guy all types of racial slurs. And again, you can pause the video to see what he wrote. I won't repeat it, but it was so derogatory and just not necessary, unwarranted. He went on to another comedian, D.L. Hughley, and he said some really nasty things to him. So much so, saying that he could afford, this is a quote, I could afford to hurt you, is what he said to DL. And following that post, DL went on to say that I guess he somehow put his address out there, and so DL and his family have been getting threats based on this post from Kanye. So really, rather, whether he's bipolar or not, this type of behavior is really, really unacceptable. It kind of crosses the line in terms of, again, going from buffoonery to actually threatening and harming people. Um, and it was also, there was also an incident I forgot to mention, in which he kind of talked about in a public forum that he and Kim almost aborted their firstborn daughter. And so he just really is reckless with his comments, and really sometimes the behavior. But this was a little bit of the quote that he wrote about DL. So I'll let you guys read it. But and it's kind of funny because it is in Kanye prose, so it's artistically written, but again, it is still a threat. So it could be a rap, a poem, but you're still threatening someone, right? Moving on, so let's talk about some of the facts here with this guy. Despite him being, maybe a musical genius, maybe not, but definitely having some, entertaining music. Um, some of the facts are that this is a dude who just cannot read the room, meaning he does not understand social cues. He appears to be insensitive and clueless, as do all people who can't read social cues, right? But the unique thing about Kanye is that he also appears to be a very abstract thinker. And people who are abstract thinkers, they make great entrepreneurs, great artists, they're pioneers of sorts. But what it also means is that they don't really pay attention to detail and rules, right? Those processes and procedures that help move the world forward, that keep things in order. So those type of things are not important to people who lack social cues, who can't read social cues. And along the same lines of not being able to read the room is him not being able to interpret social cues from his now ex-wife. She divorced him. She served him with papers saying, I no longer want to be associated with you and in marriage with you. But what does he do? He instead goes to purchase the house across the street from her. And here's the house here. That is such a creepy thing to do, is to purchase a home where you can see somebody come and go 24 hours a day if you want. When the person specifically said they did not want to be bothered with you anymore. And so, is that harassment? Maybe, maybe not. I don't think that's the technical definition of harassment, but it's just creepy. And so, yeah, that's another move that he recently made. Now, the most disturbing thing to me, and I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on this, the most disturbing thing to me is this video, Easy. It is on social media platforms. I'm not sure how this video is even allowed. It's garnered almost 7 million views so far, probably because we're talking about it. But it's so dark, it's demonic, it's evil. He's supposed to be into the church now. He has this church choir, and he just has been preaching about God and so on and so forth. But the very first frame, or one of the first frames in the video, is shows a burning church, right? And then it's a claymation film in black and white, very, again, dark. You can see from some of the photos here, it features a severed head where he appears to be torching. And when I say he, it's a claymation figure that looks like him, torturing this figure. And some people think that figure is Kim Kardashian's now romantic interest, her love interest right now. There's even a point where he is walking around with the person's severed head, and he pours some rose seeds, presumably that will grow based on the spot that the severed head was in. So again, you can take artistic license, but this is very harmful and threatening to say the least. Now, I put the dark passenger up here. If anybody is a Dexter fan, you know exactly what that means. If you're not, I'll explain a little bit. The dark passenger, I wonder if this is Kanye's dark passenger that has surfaced, and what that is in the television series is Dexter is this very everyday man, right? Just family guy, jovial, hardworking guy, just wouldn't notice him out of a crowd. However, he has this dark passenger that allows him to do very, very um, evil things to people, under the guise that he is ridding society of its trash, right? That he's getting rid of people who would otherwise harm others. And so, again, I wonder if this is Kanye's dark passenger that has really taken over, that has come out, and he has allowed us to see it. Whatever it is very disturbing. I'll put it that way. Um, in terms of, how did he get here? How does anybody like him get here? We talk about before you go about traumas and pathologies. One of the things that struck me, there's a video on one of the movie platforms called I'm sorry, Genius. They spell it kind of weird. Genius. Jenyuhs. A Kanye trilogy. Um, and for what it's worth, it's a guy who was his cameraman slash associate slash friend, I guess, who filmed him for almost 20 years. And so that in itself is odd, but because this person has all this raw footage, it really provides us some insight into his life. And the thing that is most obvious in this footage is that, of course, he was a hard worker, he was a hustler. But it was the relationship he had with his mom, Donda. And Donda, I think it was in 2007 or 2008, she died due to complications from plastic surgery. And so I wonder if that broke him. I wonder if that, was the source of a psychotic break that just didn't surface. But the relationship between he and his mom is so beautiful. She loves him to pieces. He loves her. He listens to her. He is very mindful of her. And there's a portion of the video where she says Kanye was always self-absorbed in a way, and so she was very, very reflective of who he was. I would imagine how she raised him and taught him to be, and really that conversation we have all the time of how you show up in the world. I sense that she had that conversation with him because in the video she told him, he was very excited about something that was going on musically, and she told him, yeah, listen, you're gonna make it. Somebody as talented as yeah, it's right around the corner. So she was very, very positive and just encouraged him. But she did tell him, she said, but you have to be careful. She said you don't want to be arrogant. And you just saw him shrink in front of her, not in a bad way, but he just shrunk. And he listened to her and he says, you think I'm arrogant? And you could tell he took it to heart. And she really was in his corner. She could speak to him apparently like nobody else could. And it's such a shame. It's just a heartbreaker that she left him at all, but she left him at that time, right before he was, extremely successful, and right before maybe he had a chance to become whole, with his mental health. And so I don't know if he had been diagnosed prior to, Kim revealing that. But I just know that his mom had a very, very special place in his heart, and she cared for him like moms do. But in this case, it was a significant, it was a very significant loss for him. The other thing that I notice is, I've heard him talk about some of his family, that he has cousins and things around him. But I just wonder, when Donda left, when she passed, who is his accountability partner? Who holds him accountable? Who can he trust around him? Because with this going on, it does not appear that he has anybody to hold him accountable, right? And it could be that he just has so much money that he refuses to listen to anybody. And, we've seen that time and time again. with various celebrities. They just refuse to listen to anybody, and interventions and things like that don't work. But yeah, I think it was in 2007 that Donda West, who was a professor in Chicago, very eloquent, very educated woman, she passed. And a lot of people say that he has never been the same since then. And I can definitely understand that loss. Now, when we talk about the lack of accountability, he's at this point now that the public, that society is starting to hold him accountable. So if somebody in his personal life won't, he's going to have to pay at some point. So most recently on Instagram, he was banned for 24 hours. And as of late, he has also been uninvited or banned from the Grammy Awards. Who knows what's coming next? But that is society's way of saying, hey, you're going to have to be accountable. And, I predict that there are many more things that are going to come for him in terms of holding him accountable and kind of banning him from society, if you will. Now, here before you go, we always talk about the mental health connection. And I just want you to know that, bipolar disorder is nothing to be ashamed of. A lot of people in society, in America, and the world have bipolar disorder. There's bipolar 1, 2, and a third disorder associated with it. And I won't go into the particulars because it is very specific what the DSM 5 talks about in terms of identifying bipolar disorder, but just in general, it deals with people having, different moods and energy and their ability or inability to function. There's intense emotional states that they go through. They call them mood episodes or being manic. And that typically is like a extremely happy, extremely irritable, or extremely depressive, right? Everything is to the extreme. And so, again, we've seen all of that with Kanye, and definitely if you have family members who have experienced this, you definitely know what I'm talking about here. But if you want to know more about bipolar disorder, please look it up in the DSM 5. And as always, consult your healthcare provider or therapist. When we talk about these pathologies, breaking the pathologies, right? That's what we're all about here, breaking those pathologies so you can find your way to emotional freedom. And when we talk about breaking pathologies, for those of you who have maybe new or have not joined us before, I just want to make sure that I clarify what that means. It's those generational thoughts and actions and behaviors that have diseased families for so long, that have stymied families for so long, and it leaves you in a state of emotional, distress, right? You can't move beyond certain things. And so, some people used to call them generational curses, but the more recent word is those pathologies. So that's what I mean when I talk about breaking those pathologies, doing something different, having a conversation, being able to take that deep dive and deep conversation so that you, if not your family, can talk about turning things around for now and for generations to come. So let's talk about breaking the pathologies. Now, when it comes to Kanye, obviously, we're going to break his pathology. Somebody give this dude a life jacket, a lifeboat, and tell him to shut up, right? That's the immediate solution for him, and obviously to get him under a doctor's care. But moreover, if you are actually dealing with this sort of thing in your family, I want to give you a couple of things to take away today. One of the things to think about is having a family crisis plan. And so, although Kanye's issue is playing out in public, you can only imagine what's going on behind closed doors. And again, if you have these issues within your family, or even, maybe you are the person with the mental illness, it is important to have a family crisis plan. And by that, I mean writing out a plan of action for when a mental health crisis occurs, a list of who does what, names, phone numbers, any list of medications that the person may be on. Do a run through with your family and or your caregivers. Treat this like the emergency that it is and can be. Treat it like a fire drill, right? It's very important, and writing it down will help you see how important and significant it is, and it will help you kind of plan out the steps, and you can do it as a family. It doesn't have to be the burden of one person. Okay, so a family crisis plan is very important. The next thing I want to talk about is forming a living trust and establishing power of attorney. God forbid that you, if you're the caregiver, if you somehow are incapacitated for a short period of time, or if you, again, perhaps die, or something happens where you're just not able to take care of this person, you're going to need to live in trust, and you're going to need to establish power of attorney. I won't go into it, but I will tell you, without a living trust and power of attorney, things get ugly really, really quickly. People go into conservatorships. We have seen publicly how that goes for some entertainers when their folks are still living. But just know that conservatorship is, sometimes it's good, a lot of times it's not. There's a movie on one of the movie platforms called I Care a Lot. It's a good movie, period. But when you're talking about this conservatorship and what can happen, take a look at that movie. But at any rate, the living trust is going to name someone who is going to take care of your mentally ill person, right? Your family member, whomever. It's going to designate that person, and it's going to give them power of attorney to make decisions for that person in your absence. Again, if this is something that you don't have and you want, please get an attorney who, does this type of thing, not just any attorney, an attorney who specializes in living trust, wills, and so on and so forth. And those are the only two I'm going to talk about today, because those two, I think, are, in terms of people with typical mental health, those can be very challenging. And so just think about those two things that you can do, those two action steps that you can do to kind of take some control of the situation. And the last thing I want to say, the last tip I'll give, is don't assume that your family will step up. Don't assume that if you die, that if you're incapacitated, that anybody in your family, that they could be at your house every day, every Sunday. Don't assume those people will step up. And here's why. Those people, if they're from the same family, they may have the same pathologies as you, right? They may not know how to deal with things. But also, they may have very valid reasons for not being able to do it. Maybe they don't have enough space in their home. Maybe they have a lot of family members and children already, right? Maybe it is just too much for them to handle mentally. And so just don't assume that family will step up, especially if you're talking about siblings, right? A lot of people have children who are close in age, and they just assume that they're going to take care of each other. Don't make that assumption. At least have the conversation with your family to see if anybody's willing. And again, even if they are, to establish them in the living trust, and to give them power of attorney. So those are just a couple of tips that I wanted to leave you with in terms of breaking our pathologies when it comes to mental illness. And obviously, you would first have to acknowledge that this is even a problem. The other thing I want to do is provide you with a resource. There are tons of resources out there, and I am no way affiliated with this organization, but NAMI is a national organization, and it helps family members and caregivers of people with mental illness. They have a very, very comprehensive site, which is why I recommend this as a resource. And the one thing I like about this site is that it also talks about taking care of yourself, right? So you're a caregiver, you're taking care of others, but don't forget about self. That's very important. And that is definitely what we always talk about here at Before You Go. So again, there are some local resources wherever you are, but if you just want to have a portal, a comprehensive location where you always go to find out information, I think this would be a really good resource for you. And then I have some questions for you to consider. I would love to know your thoughts down in the comments. In terms of Kanye, do you guys think that he is drowning in his own arrogance? Do you think he's destined for doom? Like, is this going to be a sad ending? Or do you think he's simply grieving and in need of some help? And for those of you who have gone through this sort of thing, my question to you is, have you gone through this crisis? And if you did you know what to do? And also, how serious are you about your own mental health? Do you know what to do if you yourself is in a crisis? And I've said in other videos, my recommendation was to get a mental health provider, a therapist, a coach of some sort, a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and have them on standby to do check-ins and for when you really do need somebody, if you do. And so I did take my own advice when I did go through my medical provider, my insurance company, and it turns out that they have some free, coaching and mental health and wellness things going on. So it's really nice. And so I've started that journey. So I'll keep you guys posted on how it goes. But it's kind of funny. I met the coach and she gave me a little bit of an assignment, and I quickly told her, listen, I don't want to do any homework. And so she was so professional. And she says, well, how about if I give you a week? And so I thought that was hilarious. So of course I'm going to do my assignment because I am very serious about the things that I talk about. But I just thought that was a kind of a funny moment, where I didn't want to do my own homework. But yeah, I would love to know some of your thoughts, and for you guys to share some of your experiences, because that's the only way we grow and learn is through others, really. And to wrap this whole thing up, as I said before, we've seen what happens when celebrities, especially, go unchecked, right? When they're not held accountable. And, we could name tons of people. The people I have here are very, very famous, and we know what happened with them. Some people might say that it was drug related, but it really, more than that, is about the lack of accountability. People answering to them and not telling them no is really what this was about. And there could have been some mental health there. I don't know. But again, we know how this ends when people in general go unchecked. And I hope that is not the case with Mr. Ye. Okay. But in closing, again, I hope that the things that I talked about here today have, kind of sparked your interest or, kind of made you take a deep dive into what's going on with you personally or in your family. And as always, I hope that this helps you on your road to emotional freedom. Also, before we go, please, if you like this content and you want to see more, go to mixedgreensforthesoul.com. That is our website again, mixedgreensforthesoul.com. I look forward to sharing more information with you and hearing your thoughts. Until next time, see you later.